All right, Gary Brecka, people want to know, I mean, this is stuff you've talked about with like Dana White before. Mm-hmm. How can we reverse our biological age, our epigenetic age? But first, like, what exactly is our biological age?
So our chronological age is, how many years we've been on Earth.
Yeah.
And our biological age is how old are we biologically? So if you could do this by biomarkers, you can do this by telomere lengths. You can do it by something called a glycan age test. So there are lots of ways. Dr. Volter Longo would say you look at 7 specific biomarkers in the blood to determine biologically where you are on the on the scale versus your chronological age. Some people are actually older than they are chronologically. So they're 45 years old, but they're chronologically, but they're biologically 50. And some people are 45 years old and they're chronologically and they are biologically 35. And the question is, what is the difference, I guess? How do you reduce your biological age?
Gotcha.
Is that what?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay.
So like, what are maybe some, I don't know, I don't want to give an exact number, but let's go through some ways that people can do that. Like, what are your top ways, especially on a budget, right? Because you look at these things and it's like, you've got guys like Brian Johnson that, are open.
$2 million a year.
They're open about how much they're spending on it. And that's what's exciting to people. And people are like, okay, that's great for entertainment, but what is actually pragmatic? Like, what can people do on a budget to reverse their biological age?
After today's video, you've got to check out this PEMF mat. So this pulse electromagnetic field mat from Bond Charge. So if you've seen me talk about the sauna blankets before, this biohacking company has come out with this super cool mat. So this mat uses like grounding technology and it uses all kinds of different waves. So it can send delta waves through your body, it can send alpha waves, beta waves to change sort of your state and help you relax. It's really cool stuff. So if you're trying to improve your sleep, trying to improve your mood, trying to calm your central nervous system, it really is a game changer for that. Like, I laid on it the first time, and within 15 minutes, I felt like my state had completely shifted. I was much more relaxed, but they're also using red light therapy, and they're also using infrared as well. So you're getting infrared heat, so you get this like relaxing effect when you lay on it. You're also getting 660 red light therapy as well, so you're getting the red light effect, but then you have 5 different settings for different PEMF settings. And what that means is you're basically sending small amounts of delta waves or small amounts of specific grounding waves to kind of change your body's feeling and how you feel. It's pretty cool. So you use it for like 10, 15 minutes per day, and you just do it when you're meditating, you do it when you're doing breath work or anything like that. They deliver super, super fast, like worldwide shipping anywhere, and that link down below saves you some serious cashola. So that is a discount link down below using that code and that link. So after today's video, if you want to try something that's going to change how you feel pretty darn quick, at least in my opinion, check out Bond Charge's PEMF mat down below.
I think that you should do 3 things. Number 1 is get some data, right? And most people have more data on their business than they have on their temple. And I actually was last night at an event with Damon John, and it was high performing CEOs in a room that Damon was doing a mastermind with, and we were having an open conversation. And if you went around the room and asked every single person, you said, what's more important to you, your business or your health? They would say, oh my God, my health. What's more important to you, how much money you make or your health? And they would say, by far, my health. And then when you bring them up on stage and you say, okay, well, what kind of business do you own? I own a marketing agency. How much money does it make? $178,000 a month. How many employees do you have? 16. What's your net profit? $44,200 a month. What's your hemoglobin A1C? Blank.
Yeah.
Right. What's your testosterone level? Blank. Right. And so when you put it in that context, you're like, wow, you have a hyper diligent amount of information on your business. And you have no information on your body, and you have no information on the temple. But every single person in the room just told me that the most important thing to them is their health, and yet they have no idea where their health stands. And they say that it's the most important thing because they're like, well, it's important to me to feel healthy. But when you say it's my priority, how are you making it a priority? And the way you make it a priority is you get data. And if you have health insurance, go to your general practitioner and get them to pull a general hormone panel, basic CBC, comprehensive metabolic panel, lipid panel, hormone panel, and basic nutrient deficiencies, and just get some data. Maybe you are maybe you are insulin resistant and don't know. People live with prediabetes for decades and are not even aware that they're pre-diabetic. People live with hypertension. It's called the silent killer because very often the first sign of severe hypertension is sudden death. And so, the first thing I would say is get data. And you can get data relatively inexpensively. I'm not saying you have to go out and get an expensive gene test or you have to go out and get expensive blood tests. Most of you can go to your general practitioner under your healthcare and get a full physical exam. And I would start there for the average person. And the second thing I would do is I would start keeping small promises to yourself. And by small promises to yourself, I mean the promises that you don't share with the outside world. Because something as simple as I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock and then going to bed at 10 o'clock. Because most of us will say, I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock and I go to bed at 1 a.m. I'm going to work out tomorrow morning and actually just skip the workout. I get inspired by this podcast. I'm going to start doing the 35 minutes of walking every morning. I'm going to expose my skin to sunlight, and then we don't do it. And we actually learn through breaking these micro promises to ourselves. We actually start to break macro promises to ourselves. So first we're comfortable with small lies internally, and then we're comfortable with larger lies internally. And I'm really talking about the internal conversation that we have with ourselves and not with the outside world. And so make a small promise to yourself, and then keep that small promise every single day. And this does a lot for our psyche, but it also does a lot to teach us that discipline is more important than motivation. And so the second thing I would say is as an adjunct to that is to develop a morning routine. And it doesn't have to be one of these exhaustive morning routines where you pray and you meditate and you journal and you get sunlight and you touch the ground and you do all of these things. Simple things like try to expose your skin to light first thing in the morning. I try to get first 45 minutes of the day. It costs you nothing. It is the most underrated biology hacks are the ones that are available all around us, right? I mean, we get three things from Mother Nature. We get magnetism from the earth, we get oxygen from the air, we get light from the sun. The further we get away from those three things, the sicker we become. Human beings were meant to spend 85% of our time outdoors. We now spend 97% of our time indoors, regulating our light, regulating the temperature. We regulate everything, which is why I say that aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. Right? So many people are aggressively pursuing comfort, so they're aging faster. So develop a consistent morning routine. And I would say if you can add 4 things to your morning routine, this is again for the average person, grounding, taking your shoes off and touching the surface of the earth is a very real thing. I get a lot of flack for that online, that it's just hocus pocus science, but it's actually very true. Human beings build up a charge. You can discharge into the earth. You can actually change the surface polarity of your red blood cells and other cells in your body just by touching the surface of the earth. We get that magnetism from the earth. We get oxygen from the air. And the truth is most of us are actually really not breathing well anymore. Number one, because we're not exercising intensely. So we lose those auxiliary muscles of respiration, the intercostals, right? Our diaphragm loses its strength. And I read a statistic. I don't know if there's any real scientific data behind this, that after age 35, 90% of people will never sprint again. I don't know if
I could believe it.
True or not. Yeah. But, as I just sort of walk the world and look at the world around me, I think about my own activity at 53 years old. I really hadn't sprinted very often, and I'm pretty aware of the need for exercise. So it's something I could believe. Again, I don't know if there's real data behind it, but that would mean that one of the things that's happening is we're not conditioning our auxiliary muscles of respiration. We're not really using our intercostals. We're not using our posture. We're not driving oxygen down into the lobes of our lungs, keeping it out of the apex of our lungs. We're not having our diaphragm massage our intestines to help with intestinal motility. The simple things that we could do to really oxygenate the body and stave off disease. So touching the surface of the earth, learning to do breath work. I use a Wim Hof style of breath work. I do 3 rounds of 30 breaths with a very extended breath hold in between. It is the one thing that I never, ever, ever, ever miss. And when I say never, ever, I'll miss a commercial flight to not miss breath work. Yeah. And so that's a promise that I keep to myself every single day. And my body knows that within 30 minutes of waking, I'm doing breath work every single day. And it knows that it's the morning, because in the morning is when we do breath work. I can almost feel my circadian clock resetting when I change time zones, because I'm up and I'm groggy, I do breath work, and the rest of the day is on a totally different trajectory. And it's free and it's easy.
How long has it taken you to do the breath work, just so people know?
It takes me about 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Sometimes if I do a really prolonged breath hold, if I'm really, really focused and I'm really relaxed, I can hold my breath for about 4 minutes in between each round. Most people will last 30 seconds to a minute and a half on the breath hold portion, to allow that carbon dioxide to build up, vasodilate before oxygen goes back into the body. So I would learn to do breath work. Very simple. You can look up Wim Hof is. He doesn't know it, but he's a mentor of mine, because I've read all of his stuff and done his
Is there a specific
certification
kind
course.
Of his breath work, like your 8 minute practice? Like, is there a particular one that is called that people can find?
And you get a lot of flack for this, because there's so many different deviations of breath work.
But if you've messed around with it, you know that there's so many different sensations and feelings you get with different breath.
Yeah.
You can flat out get high.
And I do get high from breath work. Like, I call it my drug of choice. That and a cold plunge. You feel amazing. Nothing makes you feel better for longer, and is more accessible, and it's portable, and you can take it with you anywhere. So you can touch the surface of the earth anywhere you go. You can do breath work anywhere you go. You can expose your skin to sunlight anywhere you go. I did a podcast with Paul Saladino a few days ago, and when we took a break in the podcast, we both took our shirts off and just went out and stood in the street in the middle of Los Angeles, and just recharged. We're very photovoltaic beings. And the truth is, most of us are not getting enough sunlight. We're actually just not breathing anymore. As we get older and our posture starts to collapse, and our kyphosis and our lordosis changes, and our shoulders roll forward and our hip angle changes, we sort of sit down on our rib cage, and we start breathing just with the apex of our lungs and not the lobes of our lungs. There's so much that we could change by simply just oxygenating the body in the morning, grounding the body in the morning, exposing it to sunlight first thing in the morning. And then I would add cold showers, because of the hormetic effect, not just because it makes you feel good, but because the regular release of cold shock proteins, the regular release of sirtuin, survival genes, the regular boost to your metabolism, to your emotional state, to your mood, and the cost of it being zero, those have really long-term consequences. And what's astounding is, I feel like if we could just get people to do those things for 7 days, give them a glimpse of how good they could feel, that's when you can start to bring all of the fancy biohacking things. If you want to do red light therapy, if you wanted to really dial in your diet, if you wanted to start targeted supplementation.
Well, let's talk about some of those things, because I think there's a nice, maybe we can divide this into almost 3 categories, like the totally free category, the middle ground, and then I'm sure there's some people out there that want to hear the gadgets,
balls out,
expensive stuff, because there's people that I know that don't even make a lot of money, but they're willing to say, hey, I want to invest in like one thing. Do I get a red light therapy bed? Do I do this? So we'll talk about that stuff at the end, keep people on the hook here. So, okay, middle ground. What are some things that maybe cost a little bit? Maybe let's say under $1,000.
Okay.
Which is still, a little bit to a lot, but just to give it a category.
$1,000, I would absolutely, unequivocally, I would get a genetic methylation test.
Okay.
I think, in my opinion, it's the most overlooked thing in all of modern medicine. And that is that human beings, most of us methylate nutrients differently, meaning we process things differently in the human body. And if you start with the premise that there's not a single compound known to mankind, not one, there's no vitamin, mineral, amino acid, nutrient of any kind that we just put into the body, and it gets used in the format that we put it in. So without an exception, everything that enters our body goes through a process of being converted into the usable form. The body is so incredibly intelligent about how we use waste from one cellular process as the fuel for the next process, and how we use waste from that process for the fuel for the next process. So what I'm saying is, there is a process in the human body called methylation. And this is where we take something that is not the active form, the form that we are using, and we convert it into the form the body can use. So for example, folic acid is essentially useless in the human body until it is converted into methylfolate. B12, for example, if you put it in the form of cyanocobalamin, it will be converted into hydroxycobalamin. So this process of conversion is called methylation. And it's governed by several major genes. And there is a test called a methylation test where you do a cheek swab, you send it to a lab, and they send you back information and says, here is where your gene breaks are, and here is what you need to supplement with. And the reason why I really like this type of testing is because instead of supplementing for the sake of supplementing, you are supplementing for deficiency. And this is when magic happens in the human body. When you give the human body the raw material that it needs to do its job. You see, most of us are wandering around in the myriad of really good supplements. Is NMN a good supplement? It's a phenomenal supplement. Is resveratrol a good supplement? It's an amazing supplement. Is CoQ10 a great supplement? It's excellent for you. But by the time you get to ashwagandha and St. John's wort and CoQ10 and NMN and and on and on and on, pretty soon you can have, a supplement cabinet that's 3 shelves of great supplements, but you haven't asked the right question, which is, does my body need it? Right? I mean, I always tell this story, and people that watch my podcast are probably sick of hearing it, but I always tell the story about when I was in grad school and I had to take all these plant botany courses, and which I really didn't like, but you have to take them, even though I was getting a human biology degree. And the thing that really stood out to me was that if you have a leaf that is rotting in a palm tree and you call a true arborist, a true botanist out to your house, and he sees that leaf rotting in the palm tree, he won't touch the leaf. He will core test the soil, and they'll say, you know what, there's no nitrogen in this soil. And they will add nitrogen to the soil and the leaf will heal. And we've stopped thinking about human beings this way, right? We want to spray chemicals, synthetics, pharmaceuticals on it. We want to cut it. We want to spray paint it. We want to do all kinds of things to that leaf, but we're not asking what is missing from the soil. And the same thing is true in human beings. What is deficient in this person's body that could be causing the expression of this condition? So if you said, what's the middle category? I would say get a genetic methylation test and find out what supplementing for deficiency really means. Like when you start supplementing for the sake of deficiency, this is when magic happens in the human body. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say you have a genetic predisposition to have high homocysteine, which means you don't metabolize an amino acid in the body called homocysteine, which everybody has in their blood, right? Everybody that's listening to this podcast has homocysteine. When you get hyperhomocystinemia, high levels of homocysteine because you have a gene mutation and you don't metabolize homocysteine, this has all kinds of potential downstream consequences. Hypertension, peripheral vascular disease, peripheral neuropathies because of the the restricted circulation. There's even ocular nerve damage and all kinds of conditions in the eye, because when homocysteine rises to a certain level, it causes vascular constriction. And when you have a vascular constriction, you drive pressure up. And sometimes people that have hyperhomocystinemia have hypertension, not because there's something wrong with their heart, but because they have this amino acid in their blood. And so I would say that in the middle category, if you want to take the next step and you're already doing the basics, and you've worked on sleep and sunlight and grounding, breath work, taking a cold shower, maybe even you've added a cold plunge, none of which will add a dime to your budget, and you really want to get some data, do a genetic methylation test once in your life, because you only need to do it once. Your genes will never change, and you'll never, for the rest of your life, guess on what you need to supplement with. And then it's fine to tune in the radio station with some of these other astoundingly amazing supplements, but cover the basis.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else in the under 1,000 category? I mean, what about maybe we've talked about light. Are there ways, do you recommend any kind of light devices? And now we're starting to see all kinds of different ones. I'm curious your take on this, because before it was just red and NIR. Now we're starting to see even some blue spectrum devices coming out to try to, kind of mimic the sun as best we can. I'm not sure if that's an area you're well versed in or not, but
yeah, I'm not well versed in the blue light spectrum. I know that you get healthy blue light from the first 45 minutes of the day, but the therapeutic impact of photobiomodulation is very well documented. I mean, I don't think that there is anyone that has looked at the literature that would argue that red light therapy has some astounding benefits for human beings and has virtually no downsides.
It's 4 years ago, I was getting called all kinds of names because I was talking about red light therapy, and now literally the same people have called me out on that are now funny enough having sponsored placements for red light therapy devices.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting how all of a sudden this is just okay, we're not going to fight about this one anymore. Like once you learn it, you can't unlearn it.
Well, just Google photobiomodulation, which is the term for red light therapy, photobiomodulation, put the word and put in any condition that you suffer from. And just wait for the scholarly or peer-reviewed studies to come up and read the conclusion section of that study for yourself. Right? I mean, certainly don't take my word for it, but you can see that there is an astounding array of applications for photobiomodulation. So I'm a huge fan of red light therapy. And before somebody goes out and buys a red light therapy bed, which is very expensive, Google around and find a clinic, or even some gyms are starting to have these, and some of these social wellness places are starting to have red light therapy where you can actually go and buy a membership and regularly expose yourself to red light. And it's not just red light, it's infrared, near infrared, far infrared, and the red spectrum. So a lot of times when you look at these beds, it looks like several of the light diodes are off. They're actually on. You just can't see them. They're the invisible spectrums. And as red light passes through the skin, I mean, it has a very positive impact on collagen, elastin, fibrin, microvascular circulation, reducing inflammation, incredible benefits for the eyes, which most people will tell you to leave your eyes open during a red light therapy session. I would agree with that.
So it's pretty hard to damage your eyes looking at it. I mean,
very hard to damage your eyes by. Remember, there's no UVA and there's no UVB rays, and it's not the high end of the spectrum of infrared. Like an infrared sauna is a very different wavelength from an infrared light bed.
Got it.
Right. Most of these light nanometers go between 600 and 1,000 nanometers of red light for the therapeutic effects in a red light bed. When you get above that, which is where most infrared saunas are, significantly above 1,100 nanometers, you're still in infrared light, but you're just in high nanometer infrared light, which means you're exciting a different chromophore, like water. And when you excite the water chromophore, the vibration creates friction and causes you to sweat, which is why you sweat in an infrared sauna, but you don't sweat in an infrared light bed. Because the term infrared doesn't just mean one type of light. It means the spectrum of infrared light. So exposing your skin, exposing your whole body to photobiomodulation would be an incredible thing.
Another question on that, just because I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah.
You can buy devices to have at home. If people had the option, let's say if they had a place 5 minutes down the road where they could actually just like buy a membership and lay in a bed full body, or have a device at their house that was like smaller, and like, would you say, hey, if it's just as easy for you to do one or the other, would it be better for them to go get the bed, or would it be better to just have it convenient in your home?
Absolutely. It'd be better to do whole body photobiomodulation in a place that has a really powerful light bed. And the reason for that is proximity to light matters. Right. If you look at most of the studies where they'll do tissue density studies or light penetration studies on non-embalmed cadavers, where you take light meters and you bury them in a non-embalmed cadaver, and you look at the milliwatts of irradiance and the depth of penetration of light, and you see how far into the tissue does it go. I forget exactly what the formula is, but as you get further away from the skin, there is a dramatic step down in the penetration density. Again, I'm forgetting what the distance ratio is, but let's say you're 1 inch away from the skin, it's half the light. If you're 2 inches away from the skin, it's like 1/10 of the light. Right, it's a dramatic drop, and the reason for that is that the outside layer of your skin scatters that light. Right, so you want the foot candle to spread inside of the tissue. Right, you don't want it to spread before it hits the skin. Right, so as the light gets further and further and further away from the skin surface, the foot candle starts to spread out. So the intensity goes way down. As I get more proximity, the intensity goes up. And so, in some of the beds that I use, you lay on it and all of the lights are the same distance from the back. In the top, they actually increase the milliwatts of irradiance as the arch gets further away from the body to drive the light with more strength. And
the only time it might be beneficial to have a pot belly.
Yeah. Yeah, you're getting right into the pot belly, yeah. Or a nice set of Tetons, you're getting right into the Tetons. We took a nosedive there. But I'm a huge fan of photobiomodulation. I'm just as big a fan of some of these devices like pulse electromagnetic field, PEMF mats. I don't think the jury's out on PEMF, the benefits of PEMF any longer too, alkalinity, repolarizing,
Let's
cells.
explain. Can you explain that a little bit? Because just how PEMF works, because that is one where I still will have people saying that that's just weird witch doctor stuff. And I mean, I cannot begin to tell you what a difference I feel if I put it on like a delta wave setting and I lay on a PEMF mat for 15 minutes. It's a noticeable change.
No question.
So how does it work? What's going on?
So PEMF stands for pulse electromagnetic field, right? So these are pulsed waves of magnetic current, usually called a low Gauss current. You can actually turn it up so that you can, PEMF can go all the way to the point where it can create a muscle contraction, right? Which is great for an acute injury or low back pain, or where you have a specific ailment that you're trying to treat. But pulse electromagnetic field in low Gauss range, if you actually want to test it, you could lay on a pulse electromagnetic field mat, PEMF mat, and prior to getting on that mat, just take prick your finger, take a drop of that blood and put it on a standard microscope, 200 to 1,000 power. And what you'll see when you look at your blood is you will see that the majority of your red blood cells are clumped together and kind of stuck up. They'll either look like stacked quarters in a roll of $10 roll of quarters, or you'll see these round cells that are stuck together and clumped up. And the reason for that is, as the polarity on the surface of the cell changes, they are attracted. So when cells have the same external polarity, same charge on the outside of the cell, they repel, which is what you want, for example, in a red blood cell and other cellular structures. But let's just take a red blood cell for example. So if I can restore the surface polarity to a cell's surface, think of what I've done. I've expanded the surface area that it can exchange with the outside environment. So eliminate waste, repair, detoxify, regenerate. The other thing that we sometimes fail to realize is that the way that a cell exchanges with its outside environment is through a phospholipid bilayer, right? Through a cell wall. These are charges moving in and out of the cell. A lot of the ways that waste gets out and nutrients gets in is through the charge in the cell wall, in this phospholipid bilayer membrane. So if I could recharge it, right? If I could repolarize the surface of that cell, if I could actually cause all the cells that are stuck together and clumped up where I'm losing surface area to separate and repel from one another, think about the increase in surface area, 32 trillion cells in the human body. And this is one of the reasons why you feel so good afterwards. So if you want to measure it like I do, I'm incessant about measuring things, then prick your finger when you get off the PEMF mat and put it back under the microscope and look at your blood again. It will look entirely different after a 20-minute session.
And before people think that this is like too freaky, you can get a microscope for like $100 on Amazon.
Yeah, you can
do this.
Yeah, under $400, you can do it. You can go to my Instagram. I do it all the time, and I'll take just a regular client, prick their finger, put it on the slide, show it in real time. I have a monocular scope where you can actually see it on a video screen, and then lay them on a PEMF mat for 20 or 30 minutes. And when they get off, wait about 5 or 8 minutes, and then prick the finger again and put it on there. I mean, you can't fake that. You can see the physiologic change in the blood. The same thing with red light therapy. I'll actually measure I will show people that there is a measurable and immediate effect from red light therapy, because one of the things that red light therapy does is these nanometer wavelengths of light will actually pass through the cell wall. They'll pass through the mitochondrial wall. They will go into the mitochondria, and they will dissociate a gas called mitochondrial nitric oxide. And they'll dissociate it from something called cytochrome C oxidase. And what will happen is when this gas, this nitric oxide gas, is released, oxygen docks. So think of cytochrome C oxidase as a one-armed man, right? He can either shake hands with oxygen or he can shake hands with nitric oxide, in the most simplistic example. I know the woke biohackers right now are about to come after me, so I'm going to try to be as precise as possible. So in order to grab oxygen, I want to let go of mitochondrial nitric oxide.
Okay.
So if you can do that, now I know that oxygen's docked. And what happens when oxygen docks? Well, you have massive upstaging in the production of ATP. You have a massive upstaging in cellular energy, right? 2 ATP to 38 ATP, not 36 ATP. So like a 16-fold step up in energy. And so if before you get in a red light therapy bed, you put a nitric oxide saliva strip in your mouth and you take it out, you'll see that it's, depending on which one you get, you'll see that it's like a pale yellowish pink, right? Then you lay in a powerful red light therapy bed for 20 minutes. Wait about 10 minutes after you get out, put it back in your mouth, and look at the spike in nitric oxide in your saliva. So how would nitric oxide, if you're not exercising spike like that.
Yeah.
Well, it was dissociated by the light and it went back, into the bloodstream. So so you can measure these physiologic effects. So I take real issue with people that say it's bogus science because it's measurable with simple tools in real time.
Yeah. Don D'Agostino was talking about red light therapy last time I was with him last week too, and talking about his lactate levels just come down after 15 minutes of that, and that's, again, it's like, that's
another cool measurement.
Yeah,
how do you know how he was measuring those?
Meter, just regular.
Yeah.
I can't remember what's the
lactate meter.
The primary meter that people are using these days.
Okay.
I can't remember what it's called. I have one too, but anyway, so it's, and he, he looks at these things because he's like, okay, where am I, at baseline on keto? Where am I at baseline, pre-workout, post-workout? He's very into lactate right now because he's a neuropharmacologist. So he's really like the impact of lactate on the brain. He's very interested in that. So he likes to study that stuff. And yeah, that's what he's noticed. He's like, okay, if I go sit in the red light therapy bed, it's like bringing it back down to baseline quick.
Wow.
So like for him, post-workout, that's kind of his routine, right? And before anyone was like, oh, Dom, he's just a keto guy. Like if you look at him on Instagram, like the dude is a brick house. Like he's behind the neck, shoulder pressing, 285 for reps. The guy, it's insane, right?
Right.
And he's not gigantic. He's
not,
maybe 200 pounds. My point is that like, he's not an athlete, but he trains like an athlete. And then he immediately is able to just like bring himself back down to baseline, which a lot of people will say that's, going off on a tangent from an athletic perspective, being able to like go all the way and then come back to baseline is a really good marker of how
huge marker.
Truly athletic you are.
Right.
Do you stay chronically stressed and elevated after a workout for hours and hours and hours? Or can you do this, do your business, and your body just says, I'm back to normal.
Right.
So increasing bodies of evidence, might be suggesting that maybe red light therapy, like right after a workout, could be really good.
Yeah. Huge. I think, I don't think the jury's out on red light therapy anymore either. Yeah. From the reduction of inflammation to the improvement in the use of oxygen, mitochondrial use of oxygen, to collagen, elastin, fibrin. I was on Joe Rogan's podcast a few months ago, and he actually ended up buying a red light therapy bed. And if you watched,
close, man. I'm close. Actually, I really am. Yeah, it's like it's something that's like, okay, if I was gonna have a big expense for my health right now, because I already have a hyperbaric.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I'm like, red light therapy bed. Like, I'm a little tired of just. Like I rig it so that it's like on two chairs hovering right above my face.
Yeah.
And I've got 4 dogs, and I just keep thinking like one of these days, like Dennis, my dog, is going to jump up and knock that thing off. And it's, and I'm a little tired because Dom was telling me too. He's like, no, you got to get it real close. So I'm like sitting, I'm rigging it. I'm laying on my back, and
he's right.
Like, it's funny.
Yeah, he's right. But I think, I think dramatic, improvements in recovery. I think it's arguably one of the best biohacking devices for longevity.
Okay, let's go maybe one more in this sub 1,000 category that you can.
Yeah, we jumped way out of the 1,000 category.
Yeah, we went to 50,000 real quick.
Yeah, we went to 50 grand.
Yeah.
0 to 100 real quick.
But for what it's worth, you can get red light therapy device. Like when I travel, I have a little one, right? Because something is better than nothing. So it's like
I have a watch.
Just hold it close to your face. And definitely, like for me, I use that upon waking, and I try to use it like sunrise and sunset time to try to, like, especially if I'm traveling, to sort of reset circadian cues as much as I can.
Yeah.
All right. What else we got?
So stay in the 1,000. This is where targeted supplementation would come into play.
Okay.
I think that for me, targeted supplementation is at a minimum. Almost everybody needs to supplement with vitamin D3. 5,000 IUs of D3 with also K2, a specific form of K2 called MK7. D3 just does so many things in the body. Cholecalciferol. So many of us are clinically deficient in vitamin D3, not the least of which is calcium transport and deposition into the bone, not the arterial wall. But immunity, fertility, there's so many outcomes from a deficiency in vitamin D3. And then secondly, I would look to be supplementing with a methylated multivitamin. When I say methylated multivitamin, if you do a genetic test, it will tell you what your deficiencies are. And if you really want to see magic things happen in the human body, supplement for those deficiencies, a methylfolate deficiency, a methylcobalamin deficiency, a B complex deficiency, and watch how quickly, I'm talking 3 to 7 days, rather dramatic changes can happen in your body. Everything from a significant decline in the occurrence of anxiety to an immediate improvement in the depth of your delta wave of sleep or your sleep overall, to a dramatic improvement in your cognitive function, especially your short-term recall, how sort of clear and cognizant and awake you feel, to your waking energy. It is one of those baseline supplements that I think everyone needs to take, and we need to test to decide which methylated multivitamin to take. And again, you don't have to get the multivitamins through me. I mean, there's lots of great manufacturers out there. Symbiotica is a great one. Thorne's a great one. Pure Encapsulations. There's lots of great ways to get methylated nutrients. But I think these are so key. And in our clinical system, we have real data. We do 20,000 of these gene tests a month. And so we have a non-insignificant amount of data on people that start with a blood test and a genetic methylation test, start to take supplements for deficiencies in their blood, everything from deficiencies in thyroid hormone T3 to excess levels of homocysteine to high levels of C-reactive protein, to poor levels of kidney filtration rates. And we see recognizable and dramatic improvements in blood biomarkers from simple methylated nutrients. And I get a lot of flack for that, but the data supports otherwise. And soon, we with the help of AI, we're going to publish, this data, but on large pools of patients, tens of thousands of human beings that are clinically deficient in certain methylated nutrients, they have dramatic outcomes in their blood work, which can be positively affected by that simple supplement.
For sure. I mean, people can't say that.
Like I sell in snake oil multivitamin. Well, I'm not saying it's going to fix your cancer, but what I am saying is it could improve your kidney, liver, lung, pancreatic function, improve your cognitive function, downregulate anxiety, improve your sleep. I'm saying all of those things are absolute positive.
Pretty inexpensive lever to try too, right? It's that's one of the
very
things.
inexpensive and low risk lever.
Yeah,
right.
It's. I mean, not. People talk about, okay, well, you need to be, if you eat a whole food diet, then you're not going to be void of any of these nutrients or anything like that.
Not true.
Bottom line is, first of all, we're not looking at every single person the same, but second of all, like even someone that is eating a healthy diet, I look at when I was strict keto early on before I really was paying attention, and talk about with keto specifically, it would be really easy to go down a route of just eating chicken and cheese and kind of next thing you know, you're like, well, I've got to be deficient in some stuff, right? Okay.
Right.
Well, so then they say, okay, we'll just add beef in because beef has a lot of things. Trust me. I consider beef a multivitamin.
So do I
really
actually.
do.
Yeah. I'm with Paul Saladino on that.
But I do think I'm with you on a multivitamin. I have stood behind multivitamins in the past. I've caught flack for it as well. But I'm not talking just a Centrum Silver or something.
Oh God,
no. We're talking hey, there is, you can't in one breath say that micronutrition is important and then in another breath say that a multivitamin isn't a good inexpensive supplement for someone to have. It's a good place to start for a lot of people.
And great brands put a lot of work into this. I mean, it took me 2.5 years just to formulate one multivitamin called 10X Optimize. And I have a lot of respect for, the folks in the industry that are actually doing real research, real serum concentration studies, real bioavailability studies, and actually sourcing their raw materials from places that we know are bioavailable, because a lot of them are sourced from China. And if you want to source everything from the United States, and a lot of the best ingredients are held by patent holders, people that have patent their formula or they've trademarked things, and so you need to go and actually enter into licensing agreements with them to license their raw material and then send it to a manufacturer so a manufacturer can encapsulate it. I mean, it's a chore to manufacture a multivitamin that has true methylated nutrients in it, that are truly bioavailable, and not just put a list of ingredients on the back of a label.
Yeah.
Like on mine, you'll see that on the back of my label, I credit third parties all over the place because they did the research, they own the patent, they deserve the credit. I just want to buy the raw material from them and put it into a capsule so it's the most bioavailable.
For sure.
And I think that there's plenty of manufacturers that are going to those extra lengths to do that have laid their ego at the ground and said, I care more about bioavailability than I do taking credit for having this proprietary blend. you know.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I'll add one more to the under 1,000 category. That's just gonna be a good set of kettlebells.
Yeah,
I mean, right? Just like get
that is so true. You can get it done with kettlebells.
We don't need to like spend a lot of time on that, but I don't want to also. I want to underscore the importance of, just
that actually brings up a good point. I think if I only had, and everybody asks you this, what's the single most important compound in the human body? Okay, well, we all work in concert, but if I had to pick one, I'd say vitamin D3. I think it's funny you say kettlebells, because I think if I only had one piece of gym equipment, I think a 50, maybe 55 pound kettlebell.
Yeah. It'd either be either be kettlebells or like a trap bar, like one of the hex bars and some plates. Like that's like, you can do so much with a trap bar, and it's like the one movement that I feel like, I also feel like,
what kind of extra stuff can you do with the trap bar? You can do farmer's walks. You can do
it's such a good
deadlifts.
Compound move, right? Like, it's just like, I feel like, if you wanted to, you could take the plates off and probably do hammer curls with it. You could do you could do shoulder presses. You could do all kinds of things. I wouldn't say it's a universal piece for that,
right.
But for like one big compound move, I feel like, because you can do a variation of a deadlift, of a squat, by just how you kind of position yourself.
I like the hex bar so much better than squats.
Way better.
I took the skin off my shin so many times trying to do deadlifts.
Okay, so let's talk just maybe a couple in the uber expensive category that might be interesting. I know before we were talking about like ozone therapy, things like that. Like, we don't necessarily have to talk about that now, but like, what are let's maybe two that are in the 1,000 plus category for reversing biological age.
So the two that I would say probably have the best documentation behind them, one obviously a red light therapy bed. The other would be something called a Hypermax oxygen system. It's based on exercise with oxygen therapy, EWOT, or what's called multi-step oxygen therapy. Dr. Van Arden, and earlier even Dr. Otto Warburg, which was a 2-time Nobel laureate prize winner in medicine. The multi-step oxygen theory is that, the aging and the etiology of most diseases has a component that is linked to hypoxia. And so EWOT, exercise with oxygen therapy, is taking an oxygen concentrator and taking 21% ambient air, filling a bag full of 900 liters of 93 to 95% oxygen, and then breathing that oxygen for 10 to 12 minutes under mild exercise, just to increase a little bit of the perfusion pressure. Okay. And so you raise your partial pressure, the saturation level of oxygen in the blood, and you're breathing 93 to 95% oxygen. You're doing like a mildly intense walk on a treadmill for 3 minutes with 30 seconds of jogging, and then mildly intense walk for 3 minutes, 30 seconds of jogging, mildly intense walk, 30 seconds of jogging. The reason why I think that this is, for the time invested and the money that you can spend and the evidence behind it, I don't think that there's a more prolific single tool for, call it age reversal or extending life or reversing your age. And the reason for that is that I believe that the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. All human beings leave this earth the same way. We all die of the same thing. We all die of something called hypoxia, lack of oxygen to the brain. It's the definition of death. We just tend to think of it as an event, like a gunshot wound, a bus, a car, a stroke, heart attack. But the truth is, most of us are on a hypoxic curve. We are either managing oxygen well or we are managing oxygen poorly. The more poorly we're managing oxygen in the human body, the faster we are accelerating towards all forms of disease and pathology. Or if we have any of those conditions, the more severe and the more quickly we will succumb to them. And so if we really want to stave off the Grim Reaper, the best way to push him off is with oxygen. And so, in my opinion, multi-step oxygen therapy, or EWOT, would be one of those investments that is simple. Hyperbarics, you're talking about a significant commitment dollar-wise, but you're also talking about a significant commitment time-wise.
Yep.
Yeah. Most of the therapeutic hyperbaric recommendations are a minimum of 90 minutes 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Most are even more frequent than that. So that's a significant commitment, which if you have a specific, autoimmune Lyme disease, if you have, specific mycotoxins, and we talked about recovering from rhabdomyolysis, those kinds of hyperacute periods where you need hyperbaric.
Yeah.
But I don't know that hyperbaric has the same place in a longevity protocol as exercise with oxygen therapy.
Yeah, and certainly more expensive, that's for sure. So
yeah, it's certainly more expensive, and a commitment. I mean, 90 minutes a day that's a commitment, because you're not exercising when you're in there. You're not you're not grounding. You're not getting sunlight.
And depending if you're what pressure you're at. I mean, some lower pressures you can bring a phone in or whatever and maybe be productive. But when you start getting into the 2 atmospheres, things like that, like you're
and higher concentrations of O2. It's the percent O2 that gets risky. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, you can't bring a device in there or something. So you're just really like, unless you want to use that time to specifically meditate. I mean, we have one for my wife's like TBI that she had, and that's
TBI. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's but it's one of those things where I don't know if it's something that every person should really. I don't know what is like an EWAT system kind of cost.
$5,000, $5,500. Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at $15,000, $25,000 typically for a hyperbaric. So
yeah. And if you want a real hard shell large one, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $1,000.
Totally. All right. Well, on that, where can everyone find you, Gary?
You can find me on Instagram at my first and last name, Gary Brecka, or at The Ultimate Human, theultimatehuman.com, or the podcast is The Ultimate Human, anywhere that people listen to their podcasts.
Right on, brother.
Awesome, brother.